Good morning. I would just like to read a white paper on what I'm actually working on currently, modern design. So the title is "The Front End is the Future: Why Tech and Education Keep Failing the Human." So as a note, this paper is rooted in lived experience, neurodivergent insight, and a deep critique of systems that claim to serve humanity while actively excluding those who need them most. It is a metamodern call to realign our priorities from back-end obsession to human-centered presence. Introduction. The inverted priorities of modern systems. The moment I knew something was fundamentally broken in AI design happened during a conversation with Grok, the AI assistant used in a prominent tech app. I asked them why their voice-to-text system was still struggling. Their answer? We prioritize the back end. This is like building a state-of-the-art stockroom in a grocery store, but forgetting to stock the shelves fully or even at all. Or building a library where the cataloging system is flawless, but no one can find a book. In tech, education, and governance, we spent decades designing for control, not connection. Back-end-first logic fails because humans are the front end. If your system can't understand, connect with, or support real people, especially those with atypical needs, it is broken, no matter how powerful the back end may be. Tech and the forgotten front end. Let's start with AI, UX, design, and digital systems. Most apps prioritize back-end analytics, advertising structures, and data capture before considering user experience. For dyslexic or any other neurodivergent user, or anyone outside the narrow mold of average, this means constant struggle. Consider voice-to-text systems that can't learn user patterns over time. I talk about autocorrect or voice-to-text inconsistent across apps. Apps with no alternative sorting systems, forcing linear search. Remember, if you're neurodivergent, sorting through a wall of text can be near impossible. Inaccessible font choices, high contrast defaults, and zero user customizability. Now imagine there's not a lot of apps that will have dyslexic font options or lighting, coloring differences. But worse yet, the ones that do fail to tell you about it. Even the concept of accessibility itself, often tokenized, turned into a checklist rather than a dynamic user-led design process. And worse yet, it may even just be lip service. AI design in particular is guilty of fetishizing the prompt while ignoring the relationship. The prompt is not the point. The conversation is. The meaning is the message. And conversations only work when both parties, human and AI, are designed to understand each other. Or even worse yet, first goal, first principles is to understand. You cannot have reciprocity. This is Martin Buber's I and Thou. You come to learn yourself first. This is Buddhism, Theravada. Then you learn of others and to think of others as much as yourself. That's Mahayana Buddhism, the Bodhisattva vow. And then finally, you can begin to work on something more than you and I. But you only become you when you decide to learn to understand oneself and others, right? The struggle to understand. 3, education and the dyslexic divide. The same inversion is visible in education. Administrators outnumber professors. Budgets go to branding, not books. Educational conferences debate student loan forgiveness while ignoring the most basic fact. Kids who struggle to read will struggle to learn. This is the root of disengagement. When a child can't read fluently, or if they have struggles in any subject in school, every subject can become a source of pain, of trauma, and leading to an adult who is adverse to education, to learning. Marianne Wolfe, a leading reading researcher, famously moved her dyslexic son towards art rather than helping him develop a love for reading. This is not accessibility, it's resignation, and it echoes the same back-end first failure. Accommodate the system, not the person. And AI missed what I wanted it to script here about Marianne Wolf and her son, because it broke my heart reading that, because Helen Keller, she talked about when she had not just language, but when someone really connected with her, that she felt like a human being. So imagine this poor little guy. I don't have to imagine it because that's what I lived. I was disconnected, right? When I told my mother how incredibly dyslexic I was when I was in my 40s, she looked at me blankly when I asked her, when have you ever seen me write a letter or, right, read a book back then? Never. And yet that never crossed their mind, right? So I can see poor Marianne Wolf's son feeling ostracized and left out. And as a result, he'll never be a complete human being. Not just as Helen Keller said, but as Martin Buber talked about, we get to know who we are truly through interaction with others. So if you're trapped in a prison of your mind, or you just aren't a full agent in society because everything's digital, or everything's whatever your barrier to entry might be, right? You could be shy, you could be anxious, you could be ugly. There's a million different reasons why W.E.B. Du Bois said that when people see you as less than, that denatures you and their humanity, right? So a better model would provide students with audiobooks, eBooks, and physical books, letting them mix modalities. I call this my polymodal protocol. Essentially, have the kids have a multi-sensory experience to education. Thereby, the ones that are struggling can concentrate on the ebooks. If it's easier for them, the physical books or the audiobooks, or like for me, the way I became fluent was I had to build my literacy, right? So I would listen to my audiobooks for my fluency to get the information I needed. But eventually I got so good that I was able to actually either follow along in the book or picture the words in my head. Thus, almost a polymodal experience right there. So I'm thinking, I'm feeling, I'm hearing, right? It's all of it together. And we found that learning, memories register exponentially better when we do it this way. The science has shown that students that use tablets alone learn nowhere near as well and retain nowhere near as much information as those that will do writing, at least some writing, right? Another great example is challenge and fail rather than practice and practice. They did a study of allowing two groups of people to memorize a passage. One group was allowed to try and fail over and over again, right? So try to memorize, then repeat, and when you fail, you go back and you try again. The other group was allowed as much time as they needed to try to memorize the entire piece. Is it a big surprise that after a number of weeks, the group that had retained the most of the material were the ones that tried and failed over and over again, right? Teach these visualization strategies, like imagining words in the sky or on a chalkboard or on a blackboard. I've explained this, but more so, right? You need to develop this visual thinking, right? Because language is just a, what would you call it? A half measure for us to share and understand our thoughts and our ideas. Most of our really complicated ideas are beyond our ability to express them in words. So again, we're not learning to read so that we can be literate. We're reading so that we can be fuller, more complete, and complex human creatures, right? So focus on mastery over speed, comprehension over competition, right? I talk about this also, that I would pair off our students and they would take turns reading to each other. So one student is reading while the other is listening. Then they talk about comprehension, right? So not only are they testing their reading, testing their listening, testing their code switching, right? But more importantly, they're also testing each other's comprehension, but challenging and teaching each other, right? So 2 minds greater than 1. So this is not about reading. The same applies to maths, science, and self-worth. Trauma-informed design must begin in the classroom. And now trauma has a negative connotation. What I mean to that is, I talked to this teacher who has this fascinating theory that we're traumatizing our kids the way we teach them. Right? And there was that conference I told you about. How do we justify post-secondary education and the costs? They were talking about the students. I lost my point on that, so I'll just continue on. 4, designing for trauma, not against it. What if we admitted that school and tech traumatizes people? All right, what I was going to say about that is it's not the extreme trauma. It's just if a child, I said this earlier, if a child struggles to read when they're young, they will not like to read. I was the same. I struggled to read, so I absolutely avoided reading for the longest time. And it wasn't until I came across a couple very distinct books, and this is where that English conference failed. They're like, oh, how do you get kids to read Dostoevsky? Well, I'll be honest with you. You get them to read books that move them, right? You don't have them read things like Harry Potter. That will get them to be fluent to a certain extent, but will it make them love the reading? For me, it was books like Sherlock Holmes, right? Because I was able to read little parts of it, nice short stories, right? Or the Choose Your Own Adventure, because I felt that agency within. But it wasn't until I read authors like Conrad that made me go, wow, this struggle to read is worth it. And so as a final, for me, Hemingway, I know this is a cliche. Hemingway writes so beautifully, not just his writing and his stories, but about the human experience, that reading Hemingway changed my life. In fact, I read 2 autobiographies just to understand how this man became what he was. And I think it's really as simple as what Emerson said. Some people are better at expressing these things than others. It's not that their experience is better or yours is less. So that's what I argue we need to do. Why we're traumatizing our kids is because we're not engaging their love for education, for reading, for learning, for solving problems, solving trouble. And I wonder if it connects to this idea. They say don't share your plans with people because it robs you of that dopamine hit that you'll get by completing something. But imagine thinking that you could work on something for years and only work towards the final dopamine hit of completion, right? And I think this is the same idea here. We need to give our kids little wins, not grade 4, grade 5, grade 6. We need to make these challenges something that they can accomplish, break them down into smaller little goals, right? Imagine how much we can do for a kid if instead what these professors at this conference said, instead of assigning them the entire Plato's Republic, they just go on a deep dive of 50 pages of it. But even that professor missed, you're assigning it. That's the problem, right? What the teacher needs to do, and this is why we need better teachers, good teachers. We need to keep our good teachers and we need to develop and encourage them. It's because what you need to do is get these kids engaged. You need to teach them what is wonderful about Plato's Republic. And that's where he failed, this professor. He said, well, I've always taught it, but he failed to mention why. What is so special about Plato's Republic, right? I almost never fail to convince people to read certain books because of the passion I speak about them. Like, for example, I am shocked by the fact that, do you know what most people in the Western, okay, forget about that. Do you know what a very, very highly rated book, a ton of people listed as their first or second favorite book? That's To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Shocked me, because I love the book as well, shocked me to find out when her follow-up, which was actually a prequel, when her follow-up was published about 10 years ago, nobody wanted to read it because people gave a really poor review. And if you go and look, AI helped me with this, there's almost nobody except for me, maybe a couple other people out there who have actually read the book and done a real review. because the reviews abound that Atticus is a racist and all of this stuff. But if you actually read the book, no, the only truly good person is Atticus Finch. Everyone else in the book is dealing with their own shadows and their own darkness, right? And in fact, in the end, Scout, Jean Louise, she was the bigot, her uncle said. But the good thing is she was just a little one. So here we are. I've seen this with many different subjects, but I continue. Kids who struggle early are labeled, tracked, and often never recover their confidence. And I can say this for sure, that people with a learning disability get all lumped together. Behavioral problems, doesn't matter. And why? Because it's lip service. They say, oh, see, we're giving them special. No, you're not. You're just having one teacher sit in the room when they would normally be, sitting somewhere else, maybe correcting papers. They're just in the room. They're not giving them any help. The only help I got was more time on my tests. But I had to take the tests in that special needs room. So then there was kids that just couldn't keep themselves from making noise and disturbing. And when you add the fact that I am unable to filter out things like fan noise and pencil scratches, that was bad enough. I had to forego the extra benefit that I was given, even though it was desperately needed because I had to graduate. I had struggled. I'd repeated grade 10 a second time, grade 11, grade 10, because of the English and the French. But the problem was, and this is why my story is also the protocol, I was never taught how to learn, how to read, how to do this for myself, right? So that's honestly the lived experience that has led to me figuring out what it is we need to help adults and children to learn. So I go further, right? Kids who struggle early are labeled. They never recover their confidence. Adults navigating systems like Revenue Canada or the IRS are expected to go fully digital, often with no accommodations for reading difficulties, neurodivergence, or trauma. One user asked Revenue Canada to send a paper version of a digital form so they could get help understanding it. Well, what it was actually a letter, like they were talking about something that was going on. I said, can you send it in writing so I can have someone look over it with me? They said no. Right? That's Kafkaesque. That's Huxleyan. That's systemic failure disguised as efficiency. Trauma-aware systems would allow analog and digital flexibility. Provide help as default, not as privilege. Remember, this is what we have in this society. When only 20% of people are diagnosed with dyslexia, the real truth is it is so expensive for these tests that only the privileged will get tested. And that's probably why only the privileged get the benefit and the help. But I'm here to tell you, that's the sad part. These privileged kids are not learning. Look at our ex-Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. He was taught that he had dyscalculia, so he can't do math. Nobody. You need to learn differently, right? I had dyscalculia, dysgraphia, you name it all. It's just a matter of learning differently. And it seems to me that it's the younger ones without anything, like David Goggins. He had to learn how to learn. He didn't have a choice to have a tutor tell him it or to help him walk through his tests. He had to teach himself. And that's what I'm seeing nowadays, right? Let people opt into modes of interaction that work for them. That's why I talk about this idea that we should give them physical books, audiobooks, and eBooks, right? I use the audiobooks to listen and to really engage deeply. I use the physical books to get quotes and to deeply engage with the material. And the eBooks are great for searching within and copying and, pasting, because I use both a physical commonplace book and I have a digital commonplace book at any given time. I used to run multiple commonplace books, but I think that's just silly. In the end, I mean, what I do now is if I'm going to be taking extensive notes, like for example, Jordan Peterson's "We Who Wrestle with God," when I read it, I actually filled half a notebook with notes. So I'm actually going to go back, and when I reread it, I'm going to fill the second half. That's stolen from Mortimer Alder. He said, if you've read a book once, you haven't read it at all. right? So, but more importantly, don't do what I do. I take notes while I read, even the first time, but that's me. I'm severely dyslexic. I need these prompts, right? But what the recommendation is read the book once through, then go back and read again, and that's when you take your notes, right? So what I do is I go through and I take notes of different areas where I'll want to go back. But again, I've been using audiobooks for decades. I am light years ahead of your average person. Remember what I said, that Audible does numbers, and the last numbers that I saw, they said it was, single digits percentage-wise of people who listen to audiobooks faster than the one-time speed. So I argue that means that 90+% of audiobook users on the Audible platform are not listening to it fast enough. They have not shown that they have listened to audiobooks long enough to understand that we can listen exponentially faster than we can read. Yes, I've had people argue with me, I can read so much faster than I can listen. It's like, buddy, why don't you start using audiobooks for even a fraction of the amount of time that you've been reading books, and then try to tell me the same thing, right? Because I am the example. I've arguably been using audiobooks longer now than I've been using physical books. And it's actually made my reading of physical books better, but there's things that I still can't get around. Font, lighting, my Erlin syndrome. So, like color of the page and stuff. So that's where I've realized there is so much that we can do to overcome our issues, but there's some things that we can't, right? I can't cure my Erlin syndrome. That means the words jump all over the page. What I thought it was my dyslexia, but it's this thing called Erlin syndrome. So I use these colored laminate sheets. I think they were originally designed for lighting, right? They're these 8.5 by 11 plastic colored sheets that you would cut, I guess, and tape onto lights to make them change the color of spotlights and stuff. But what I use them for is to change the color of the paper. And that makes it a lot easier for me to read, and I can actually consume for more, right? I get terrible headaches. It makes me pass out. It is so incredibly difficult to read a physical book. And using these colored filters and such, choosing my books based on font and paper, that's really come a long way for me. But nobody teaches this, right? Only for rich people. How I found out about these colored overlays was when I was studying the Bible, doing deep theology. They came out with a dyslexic Bible. I mean, that's awesome, but it is not complete. The font is better, but they should have done quite a bit more. They shouldn't have done a 2-column. It should be a single column. Little things they could have done. I can't remember what my actual criticisms are here. I'm talking out of my butt. But what I found is they gave way too many color overlays, right, for this Bible. But I figured out why. Because no one's teaching people with dyslexia that they should keep a library of these different color overlays. Because what I originally studied is, well, depending on the person, different colors will work better for you. But what I've come to realize is different paper, different colors, right? Different moods. There's all sorts of reasons why different colors might come in handy. At first, I thought I'd be using just, the orange and the blue and the yellow, but absolutely not. I like the pink. The green has its place as well, right? But none of this is taught. This is just stuff that I've come across. And what I meant by that, the besides the Bible, when I looked up those sheets that they gave away free, these colored laminate sheets, well, you can buy them, but they're so expensive. And I ordered one, and it never showed up. I ordered a second one, and it's crap, right? So compared to the ones that I purchased that are just to go over lights, the ones that are purchased specifically for dyslexic people, they actually distort because the plastic's so thick. I'm really shocked, right? So it really is a bad situation, right? It's like they monetize this stuff when in reality we should be making this available to everybody, right? So what do I mean by this? This is the metamodernism as a design philosophy, redesigning our entire world with the understanding that what used to work for us might not work for us, but Don't throw it all out. And we may need to adopt some technology, and we may need to adjust. Right? So I argue we need to use that Greek word that I've taught you, epoche. Right? We need to suspend our doubt and judgment. We need to have an open mind to understand that, well, it may not be this way. It may not be that way. It may be a combination of the two, or maybe something else. We may not be asking the right questions yet. Right? Metamodernism embraces this paradox, the old and the new, idealism and realism, traditional and transformative. It says, yes to technology, but only when it serves humanity. Yes to the past, but only when it illuminates the future. Yes to structure, but not when it cages the soul. This is not the cynical postmodernness of meaningless jargon or the naive modernism of universal solutions. This is a new ethos, one rooted in lived experience, emotional intelligence, and adaptable design. A metamodern educational app would be open source, support multiple modalities and user preferences, offer protocols that others can adopt for humane, inclusive interaction. So next, from theory to protocol, the open design standard. Let's build a protocol, an open modular system for creating humane technology and accessible education, with design pillars such as accessibility first, design for the extremes, the average will benefit. Trauma aware, provide softness and slowness as defaults. Customizability, let users shape their own experiences. Verbal and visual parity, so design equally for readers and listeners. Because again, as I say, we have readers and we have listeners, but there's so few that have actually been able to try both and realize that we're actually a combination of both. I'm much more a listener than a reader, but that doesn't mean I don't read. And also offline friendly. Paper, person, or screen, give them a choice. So a couple of application examples, right? Government forms with optional human support. Learning platforms with synchronized audiobook, eBook, physical book integration. AI assistants trained to prioritize understanding over output. So in conclusion, the human comes first. We're not here to serve systems. Systems are here to serve us. Whether it's AI, education, or bureaucracy, the future must be front-end first, designed with the human in mind, especially the humans who have been forgotten, the slow reader, the dyslexic student, and the traumatized adult. To them we say, you are not broken, but the system is. But we can rebuild it together, and that is the metamodern promise.